Get y'all behinds in this room, everybody. We have to talk. This is Ashley with Ashley Says So, and I am back with another old Hollywood scandal video, and I'm not sure if Kim Porter tried to write a revealing book about the elites, but I know somebody who did. And honey, when the elites found out about what she was doing, they took her out in the worst way possible. So grab your popcorn and perk your ears up, and let's talk about the tragedy of Miss Vicki Morgan. Let's get to it. Y'all know my disclaimer. All of my videos are for entertainment purposes. Everything in them is rumor, gossip, and scandal that I get from books, word of mouth, on TV, anywhere I can find it. I do not know what is true or false. Let's get to it. Victoria Lynn Morgan was born on August the 9th, 1952 in Colorado Springs, Colorado. Her mother's name was Constance Morgan and her father's name was Delbert Morgan. Now, unfortunately, Victoria's dad abandoned the family while her mother was still pregnant with her. So because of this, she slowly started to show the effects of a young female that was looking any and everywhere for love and acceptance. And by the time she was 13 years old, there was a 17-year-old ready to offer her all the love she could bear. And his name was Gary Haskell. And by the time Vicki turned 15, her now 19-year-old lover started pressuring her to give up some of her good. And her little 15-year-old behind ended up getting pregnant. To make a long story short, Vicki ended up being sent away where she gave birth to the baby, and when she came back, they pretended that the baby belonged to her mother. Now, even though Constance was pretending that this baby, who was a boy by the way, it was hers, she still wanted Vicki to get some responsibility, stop running the streets, grow up. Well, Vicki told her mama Constance, yeah, I'ma grow up all right, but it ain't finna be here with you and this doggone baby. I'm about to go to Los Angeles. And at the age of 16 years old, that is what Vicki did. And since Vicki was such a beautiful girl and she was very young and a fresh face on the scene, it wasn't long before somebody snatched her up. And this was a 40-something-year-old Jewish businessman by the name of Earl Lamb. And it was while married to Earl Lamb that Vicki got her first taste of the degeneracy that ran rampant amongst wealthy men. Per Vicki, the very first time that the man got on top of her, he leaned down until his mouth was right beside her ear and started saying the most outrageous things that Vicki had ever heard. You like this, you stupid whore B? Is that hard enough for you? The boys back home couldn't do it like this, could they? And so Vicki, who is not used to this at all, is laying there stunned, but child, this was just the tip of the iceberg. Before you know it, Earl was requesting threesomes, and he told Vicki since she was his wife, it was her duty to go out and find another female. And get this though, honey, also told Vicki, when you find the other girl, it better not be no other white girl you bring up in here. You know I like them black. Child, it might be a scandalous thing, child, but I know one thing, Vicki went to looking. And after several coveted black woman threesomes, Earl was finally placated. He started to settle down, started not to want to do so much, really wanted to just be home at night, drinking his nightcap, sitting beside his wife. But Earl had forgotten his wife was 16 years old. As a matter of fact, she had just turned 17. And she ain't wanted to be sitting inside no house drinking no nightcaps with Earl's bald-headed tail. Vicki wanted to be out with her friends, dancing and grooving the night away, and that's just what she did. So much so that after a while, Earl ended up exploding on Vicki, and he told her she was a married woman, her place was at home. Vicki ignored him, and she still went out to do what she wanted to do. Well, one night, Vicki was out doing her regular partying with her homegirls and stuff, and she ended up leaving the club. And as she was walking away, all they heard was skirt. Child, it was Earl, and he screeched up to that curb, got out that doggone car, and grabbed Vicki by her hair and laid the smack down. As a matter of fact, Vicki was face down on the hood of the car because Earl was slamming her face on the hood of the car. And right after this incident, Vicki knew it was over, honey, but she wasn't going to leave just yet. Vicki wasn't finna leave those comfortable surroundings. I mean, what did you expect her to do? Go get a job? And so she ended up staying for a while. until one day the heavens seemingly opened up for Vicki Morgan. The folks say that she and a couple of homegirls were going out for a shopping trip. And the homegirls were supposed to meet Vicki at a restaurant, but when Vicki got there, the homegirls were nowhere to be found. So Vicki took a seat at the bar. Well, while she's sitting there sipping her drink, she hears the front door of the restaurant chime, and so she looks back and she sees this older guy staring at her with a young woman standing beside him. And so Vicki looks at him, she kind of smiles, and then she turns back around to focus on her drink. That is until Vicki started hearing, "May I take your hat, sir? May I take your coat, sir? How's the stocks today, good sir?" Just all type of employees making a fuss around this man. So Vicki knew immediately that this guy was important, but she still didn't really understand exactly who he was and how important he was. But baby, let me tell you how important he was. The man standing at the door was the one and only historic businessman, ALFRED Bloomingdale, grandson to the even more historic businessman, Lyman Bloomingdale, who was the original owner of the clothing chain Bloomingdale's. That's enough right there. But ALFRED wasn't just a trust fund baby. Oh no, he was a true businessman on his own accord. ALFRED Bloomingdale pretty much is the father of the credit card. So when I'm talking about money, I'm talking about money. Like I said though, she understood that ALFRED was important, but she didn't really know how important just yet. However, when ALFRED and his young lady beside him, he walked past Vicki to go to their table, ALFRED tapped Vicki on the shoulder and he says, you must be waiting for somebody. Why don't you come over to the table and sit with me and my companion? Just sit with us while you wait for your friend. When Vicki gets to the table, she don't want to seem like some little broke girl while everybody else got money, so she starts to talk about her husband, Earl Lamb, how he's a businessman, and then she tells the table that Earl is getting her private tennis lessons with a famous tennis player. And this right here was the open doorway for ALFRED to make his move. So what he does is tell Vicki, Vicki, you said you're about 17, right? Well, I have a daughter that's your age, and she's also playing tennis. And so let me just give you her phone number, and maybe you can call her and y'all can go play tennis together. And Vicki's not dumb. She's been to enough social functions to understand that this older guy is basically giving her his number, but she's not attracted to ALFRED Bloomingdale the way he looks. So in her mind, even though he's handed her this phone number, she ain't finna call this man. And so while they're finishing up the conversation, Vicki's friend ends up coming into the restaurant. And so Vicki ends up leaving the table to go sit with her friend. Well, I guess ALFRED knew that Vicki wasn't going to take the phone number seriously, because on his way out the door, when he walked past Vicki, he tapped her on the shoulder again, and then he handed her a folded up piece of paper. Vicki didn't open the paper until ALFRED was out of the door, but when she did, baby, it was a check for $8,000. Hot damn, baby. Vicki's heart started beating through her doggone chest. She could not believe it. So she's looking at it, and then she's showing her friend, her homegirl, very excited. And then her friend gets to looking at the name on the check, and she's like, Bloomingdale. He's a Bloomingdale. The clothing store Bloomingdale's. And as far as Vicki calling the phone number that ALFRED Bloomingdale gave her, baby, she didn't have to. Because that very next day, while she was sitting at home, ALFRED Bloomingdale called her. He had his private investigator find out everything about Vicki Morgan, and he called her at her house, the house that she shared with Earl Lamb. But ALFRED didn't care about none of that. As a matter of fact, as soon as he got Vicki on the phone and she told him, listen, thank you for the money, but you do know I'm married, don't you? And my husband lives in this house. Baby, ALFRED told her, I don't care nothing about that. Your husband doesn't move me. I want you, and I want you now. And so he started to call Vicki's house or her phone 10 times a day, every day, trying to get her to meet up with him. And eventually Vicki did meet up with ALFRED. She found out that ALFRED wasn't just an older man. He was actually 54 years old to her 17 years old. She told ALFRED she had a son that her mother was raising. None of that mattered. ALFRED wanted her to be his. And she asked him pretty much I've been kind of putting you off, sir. Like, I haven't been answering the phone sometimes when you call. Like, why are you still chasing me? Honey said Alfred told her I'm a businessman. And to be quite frank, I'm a very successful businessman. That means I don't give up on nothing. When I hear no or I get rejection, I keep on coming back to back to back until I get what I know should be mine. Woo, child. Talk about Steam City. Baby, Vicki had Steam City and was sitting there with steaming titties. And she promised Alfred after this first date that she would see him again. And she did, but Vicki was not ready for what happened on that second date. Honey, the folks say that Alfred called her and gave her a location to meet him at. But when Vicki got to the location, a girl who was about 20 years old pulled up in a fancy sports car. And she told Vicki that Alfred was at one of his many residences and that he had sent her to pick Vicki up. Well, when Vicki got to the residence, another young lady opened the door. And when Vicki and the girl she was with walked into the door, both of those ladies sat Vicki down and they explained to her that Alfred wanted to have some fun. Vicki was put off by this because this was only her second date with Alfred and he hadn't showed her this side at all. But hey, she was married to a man who liked to have threesomes and group sex, so, she agreed to it. Then the girls led her upstairs to a bedroom where Alfred was sitting on the bed with only boxers and socks on. When Alfred saw Vicki, he told her that he was happy that she agreed with what he wanted to do, and then he asked her to undress. And once she got undressed, the other girls immediately got undressed as well. But while Vicki stayed put in the middle of the floor, the other girls walked over to a closet, and it was a closet with 2 doors, and each girl stood in front of one of the doors. Well, at this moment, Alfred gets up off of the bed, then he rips back the cover and he has ropes. And so he goes over to the 2 girls that are standing in front of the closet and he ties their hands up and kind of has them up over their head like this. And he takes the rope and throws it over the door and then ties it to the doorknobs on the other side. Pretty much so the girls are kind of just hanging in front of the closet like this. After Alfred is done tying these girls up, he asks Vicki, may I tie you up? And Vicki says, okay. But when he ties Vicki up, he ties her hands in front of her down here like this, and then he pushes her face first on the bed. So Vicki is laying across the bed wide-eyed and kind of straining to look over her shoulder to see what's happening, and suddenly she hears,
"Do you nasty tramps see my new girl, Vicki?"
And Vicki is like, oh my gosh, what the heck is going on? But her thoughts are interrupted by Alfred.
"Look at Vicki. Do you see how beautiful she is? She's not a whore like you are. Now, you 2 dusty, crusty, stinking in the TT wenches, tell me that Vicki is beautiful. Tell me that she's beautiful."
And so the girls that are tied to the door are like, yes, Alfred, she's beautiful. Vicki is a queen. And Vicki is dumbfounded. But there's also something sick and twisted growing inside of her. Something about Alfred behaving this way, like a wild man losing control, is turning her on. And then what was even more exciting for Vicki was the flattery. I mean, this man was hitting these other women just so they could give Vicki her rightful due. I mean, she was beautiful. And so when Alfred finally dropped the whip and came over and told Vicki to toot that thing up from behind, she let him do what he wanted to do. And it was after this first night of debauchery that Alfred really fell head over heels for Vicki. He just had to have her. She let him do what he wanted to do. She obeyed him. She didn't get up running and screaming when he started spanking these other women. And so he told Vicki he would have her now, even if he had to pay big money to do it. And allegedly, that's exactly what he did. Soon after this session, Alfred called Earl and allegedly offered him $50,000 so he could buy his wife. And the folks say that is when Earl threw his hands up and signed the papers and he took the money. Gossip claims that as soon as Alfred got Vicki all to himself, he basically wanted to have group sex all the time and he made Vicki the madam. And not only did he make Vicki out to be a madam to go find the girls, she had to dish out orders for the girls to do. Like Vicki would say, come on over here and give me some crunching and munching, and you better make it fast too. And if the girl came over too slow to crunch the munch, baby Alfred would tell Vicki, you know what to do, and he would hand Vicki the whip, and she would whip the girl, and then sometimes slap the girls or whatever. And one of Alfred's biggest kinks during these group sessions was, dun dun dun, you guessed it, black girls. And allegedly when he got a black girl to participate, she had to be a slave. He would tell all of the other women in the room to take off their clothes, and then when they did, he would, snap his fingers and tell the black girl, hey, you slave, go pick up those clothes off the floor. And so the black girl would go and pick up the clothes off the floor. Then he'd be like, hey, you slave, go get our drinks. And the black girl would also have to say things like, yes, massa, yes, thank you, sir, yes, massa, and do all that kind of stuff. But then in the midst of her doing everything that Alfred tells her to do, the black girl was suddenly supposed to say, massa, F you. I ain't doing nothing else you say. F you, massa, I'm running away. And this is when Alfred would stand up and grab the black girl by the neck and be like, what did you say to me, you black wench? And then Alfred would drag her back to the bed, bend her over his knee, bring out his whip, and then start whipping her. Matter of fact, the subject of my next video, a lady named Tanqueray, said that she was one of these black girls. But child, Tanqueray said when Alfred started hitting on her with that whip, she got scared, child. She took her $300 and got the H up out of there. And y'all gotta make sure y'all watch both of these videos to get back to Vicki's video. As you can see, Alfred was allegedly a big freak. And there also were rumors that sometimes he would have these group activities with men. But I don't know how true that one is, because allegedly Vicki's first husband, Earl Lamb, also liked to have relations with men. So I'm not sure which one of those is correct, but that's the rumor. Either way it goes, when it came to being or dealing with Alfred Bloomingdale, Vicki was dropped into a world of illicit and crazy behavior of the elites. And so with Vicki by Alfred's side, she saw plenty of politicians, plenty of movie and music executives, heck, plenty of CEOs of corporations getting down and dirty. Oh, baby, I'm talking about very nasty golden showers, possibly even number 2 showers. Of course, men on men, women on women. And like I've said plenty of times before, everybody was grown and adult and doing their own thing. But here's where the dark part came in. Allegedly, Alfred would have Vicki to go to the place that everybody was going to meet at early and set up a hidden video camera. And so the man had blackmail tapes on several powerful people. And then depending on how Alfred wanted to handle it, he would have Vicki let the person know right then they were being blackmailed. She would wait until the session was over, then she'd be putting on her clothes, and then she'll point to the camera and be like, see this right here? Yeah, we got you. So Mr. Bloomingdale would like for you to go ahead and sign that contract that you've been holding out on. So it was really a messy thing. As a matter of fact, somebody said one of the people that Alfred had a blackmail tape on was a U.S. congressman. Also, he allegedly had a blackmail tape on 4 highly placed administrators in the Reagan administration. So since Alfred and Vicki were doing these things, they were pretty much like their own little Bonnie and Clyde. So Alfred gave Vicki an allowance of about $18,000 a month. Sometimes they go right off in the sunset and go get something to eat, go on shopping sprees. As a matter of fact, this is what caused the first little falter in their little Bonnie and Clyde relationship. Because one day while Alfred and Vicki were trying to sneak and go grab something to eat, he was spotted by a lady named Betsy and her daughter, Lisa. And this lady named Betsy was Alfred's wife, and this daughter named Lisa was Alfred and Betsy's daughter. And Betsy didn't act no fool in public. She didn't yell out Alfred's name or nothing like that. She waited until he got home and she lit into him, because Betsy wasn't just anybody. She wasn't just some broke poor girl who had married up. No, baby, she was a wealthy debutante in her day. Her father was a neurosurgeon. In fact, Betsy Bloomingdale was one of the original socialite swans, somebody on the top of the social register. And if you think she was gonna let her husband running around with a nobody in her eyes ruin her social standing and her image, oh baby, you had another thing coming. Betsy cursed Alfred clean out, told him that she would divorce him and take everything. Also, she changed all of the phone numbers to the house, to his office, and switched the bank account over to new numbers. She did it all. Alfred was so panicked by what his wife Betsy was doing. He snuck out the next day to a payphone to tell Vicki, they had to put a pause on what they were doing. Vicki was mortified. This man had her in a huge rented house. He had got servants to serve her. She was in a car that he was making payments on. And now he's calling her out of nowhere, telling her that he's gonna have to put a pause on everything and he can't see her for a couple of months. Not only that, can't give her money for a couple of months because his wife is monitoring everything. Vicki was beside herself, and it really shouldn't have been like this. The girl was getting an $18,000 a month allowance, but she didn't save a dime. Matter of fact, around 3 months after Alfred had cut her off, Vicki was about to get evicted. She was about to lose her car, and she ended up getting desperate. And she did something that I believe was one of the great mistakes of her life. She went down to Alfred's business office and she started to act a fool. She told his secretary off. She pushed her way into his office, even picked up an ashtray and allegedly threw it at Alfred's head, basically asking him, what am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to do? Your wife called and you just cut me off like that? And I'm not saying that Vicki made a mistake because of Alfred, because right after she did all of this, Alfred forgave her. And then very soon after that, they started to mess around and do what they were doing all over again. So I'm not talking about Alfred. This was a mistake because of the other people Vicki had been involved with in her life. When the word got around to the other elites, some of Alfred's friends, they didn't really like how this girl would just lose her emotions and just pop off and start talking crazy. Who's to say that she wouldn't just get mad one day and just start telling everybody's business? So believe me, there were notes taken and kept. But to move on with the story of Vicki and Alfred, after this whole incident of him cutting her off like that, this made her worried. And so Vicki started thinking more in terms of what if she replaced Betsy and became Alfred's wife. And Alfred led her on, telling her that he would divorce Betsy one day. But as the years started passing, it was clear that Alfred was never going to leave his wife. And so in an attempt to make Alfred jealous, Vicki decided to cut him off and go and find another wealthy man. And we would like to cheer her on if she didn't do it in the messiest way possible. The folks say that one of Vicki's friends was a girl named Leslie, and Leslie was dating a wealthy man by the name of Bernie Cornfield. Well, one day Vicki is venting and telling Leslie her problems that she's having with Alfred, and she tells Leslie, I just want to get away. And Leslie tells Vicki, well, me and my boyfriend Bernie, we're going over to London. You're free to come with us if you want to. And so Vicki does go on that trip. Well, when Vicki gets there, she can tell that Bernie is into her. And because of this, she starts getting a little bit messy. Like when Bernie would take Vicki and Leslie shopping on these shopping sprees, Vicki would pick out something ridiculously expensive, something even more expensive than what Leslie would ask for, just to see if Bernie would buy it, just to see how much he wanted her. And Bernie bought every single item. And it all culminates one night when Vicki is in her hotel room laying in her bed, and Bernie comes in her room and he gets in the bed with her. Now I gotta give Vicki a little bit of props. She did not sleep with Bernie on that trip. As a matter of fact, she made him get up out of the bed and go back into the bed with Leslie. However, when they got back to America, Leslie was put out of Bernie's house and Vicki was moved into Bernie's house. But soon Vicki started to get messages through her friends that Alfred wanted her back. And Vicki tried to play hardball, but in the end, Bernie Cornfield just did not have the type of money that Alfred had. He didn't have no money to give Vicki no $18,000 a week for an allowance, and so Vicki ended up going back to Alfred, but not before allegedly getting a Maserati out of burning cornfield. When Vicki got back with Alfred, she realized that her little disappearing act still didn't make him want to marry her, and she finally just made a deal with him. You know, Vicki told Alfred that she's going to go and continue to see and sleep with whoever she wants. She's going to marry whoever she wants, and if he still wanted her time, he would continue to give her her allowance while she went off and did what she wanted to do. And this is when Vicki Morgan really started to get into all type of trouble. She was just out there pooking and putting TT everywhere. Rumor has it she even loaned herself out to a modeling agency so they could hook her up with several wealthy men. And it was this modeling agency that allegedly almost had Vicki Morgan's tail disappearing for good. The folks say that the agency called her one day and told her there was this huge modeling job off in Morocco. So Vicki gets to Morocco, and at the airport, this mysterious man who called himself the ambassador came and picked her up. And gossip claims he took her to a very obscure inn. There were all sorts of strange symbols on the marble floor, and all sorts of medieval statues and stuff really that probably looked like ritual type stuff. Well, anyway, the mysterious ambassador shows up at Vicki's door, and he tells her that she needs to put on her best dress because she's going to dinner tonight. And she sat at the head of this very, very long table, and allegedly a man with a mask on comes and sits down at the other end of the table. Now, this whole scene right here really scares Vicki. So gossip claims she excuses herself from the table and she goes somewhere and she finds a telephone, and immediately she calls the American embassy, I think it is, I'm not sure. But whoever she calls, it's something to do with America, and she asked them to put her in touch with ALFRED Bloomingdale. And as soon as she gets on the phone, she describes to ALFRED Bloomingdale what's going on. And he's like, they're gonna sell you, Vicki. They're gonna sell you, or they're gonna use you for the night, and they're gonna kill you. Nobody's ever gonna find you. Well, now Vicki is really panicking, and then Alfred tells her, hold on, let me make some phone calls. And so while Vicki is standing there waiting for Alfred to call her back, the mysterious ambassador man bursts into the room, and he's angry, and he tells Vicki, did you call somebody? And Vicki tells him that she called ALFRED Bloomingdale. And so the man immediately stuffs Vicki back into the car, and he takes her to the airport, and he books her a flight for New York. When Vicki gets back to New York, Alfred picks her up and takes her back to Los Angeles, and the rumor never really confirms that this had something to do with sex trafficking or ritual murder or something like that. But from the setup, something was gonna happen. And here's the crazy thing about it, y'all. Apparently, ALFRED Bloomingdale calling whoever he called made such a big deal and such a big fuss in Morocco. The king of Morocco, King Hassan, heard about the whole situation. And when he heard about it, there was only one thing on his mind, and it was not punishing that mysterious ambassador or that man in the mask. The only thing on his mind was trying to get Vicki for himself. And so allegedly at a later time, Vicki went back to Morocco several times to sleep with King Hassan, because every time he sent her back home, he sent her home with a huge paycheck. Now, by the time Vicki was around 26, 27 years old, she ended up getting married to a lawyer by the name of Bob Schulman. And Bob didn't care that Vicki was messing around with Alfred. He didn't care about none of that. He just wanted to have a piece of her. And so when Vicki married Bob, she tried to play this whole settled down home life thing, and she ended up even getting her son away from her mother to come and live with her. But Vicki got bored with this whole staying at home being a mom thing, so she started to go out and party again. And it was during this time that she found herself in one of the most awkward, dangerous situations that anybody could find themselves in. And it all started when she went to a party that had a Saudi Arabian princess in attendance. And I'm just gonna call her Princess J because I cannot pronounce her name. Now, Princess J was a wild, wild girl, and allegedly she was lesbian. And can you even believe that? Saudi Arabia and lesbian don't even go together. But everybody knows the rules are different for the wealthy. This princess, the king's daughter, was just shipped away to the USA so she could live her life without bringing shame on her family. And allegedly, this princess had already heard all type of things about Vicki because she had been passed around so many elite circles. And so she told Vicki that if she would stay with her for a while, she would give Vicki access to anything she wanted. Wealth that Vicki couldn't even imagine. And what you think Vicki did? Baby stayed right on over there with that doggone Princess J. Basically said forget her husband Bob Shulman and her son. And even though I haven't talked about it that much, Vicki, living this very fast-paced life, was not a stranger to drug use and drinking and things like that. However, when she got with Princess J, who had a whole bunch of drug habits, Vicki got hooked on heroin, got hooked on cocaine, marijuana, all the drugs you can think of, Vicki got hooked on it. Her and Princess J used to just sit there and do drugs all day and all night. So Vicki is just staying with her latest lover when one day Princess J says she wants to sail to New York, I believe. She has her own yacht. So it's Vicki, Princess J, another couple that Vicki doesn't know that well as the captain and his girlfriend on the yacht. So about half a day into the trip, Vicki is just sitting back in the bedroom smoking on something when she suddenly hears, "Damn, you stole my money!" That girl started to hear footsteps pounding down the hall towards her door. Suddenly, Princess J bust in. "You stole my money!" She hopped on Vicki, slapped her across the face, had her on the floor, and started choking Vicki, yelling about how she knew that Vicki stole some money from her because she had some money put away in a suitcase, and Vicki is just getting choked, trying to tell the girl, no, I didn't. Vicki finally ran into a point where she felt like all that money really didn't matter. So as soon as they ended up getting to New York or selling to New York, allegedly she called ALFRED Bloomingdale once again, and he put her in a plane to fly back to Los Angeles. Well, now we're about to start getting into some of the details of the ending of this story, because after Vicki stopped dealing with Princess J, she had a serious drug problem, so she ended up having to go to rehab. And about a week or two into her stay at rehab, a mysterious gay man by the name of Marvin Pankos just happened to check into the rehab center. And when he did, he made a beeline for Vicki, and they became very fast friends. In fact, Marvin was more than just a friend to Vicki. He acted like he worshipped her. So Marvin and Vicki are joined at the hip, and after Vicki's month-long or 2-month-long stay, it is time for her to check out. Well, what do you know? Mysteriously, it's also time for Marvin Pankos to check out. And he tells Vicki, maybe we should get our own place together. But ALFRED Bloomingdale, as well as Vicki's husband, Bob, feels like that's not a good idea. So Vicki ends up instead moving into a new big house that ALFRED has rented for her. And very shortly after Vicki moved into this house, ALFRED told her that he was sick. He had gotten cancer. Well, about 9 months after ALFRED's diagnosis, he ends up passing away, but not before leaving everything to his wife Betsy. And when Betsy got her lawyers to look over all of the information, she saw where her husband had been giving Vicki this huge allowance every month, and she immediately cut it off. This right here sent Vicki in a whirlwind. She hadn't saved not a dime, and now her allowance was getting cut off. She was about to lose everything. And so she got desperate. And we all know how Vicki Morgan acts when she gets emotional and desperate. Vicki's little bobblehead tail did 3 things that would seal her fate forever. First things first, she challenged ALFRED's very elite and had very elite friend's wife, Betsy Bloomingdale, by suing Betsy Bloomingdale as well as ALFRED's estate for palimony. It's basically like alimony for mistresses. So that was the first thing that she did. And the second terrible thing that she did was tell her lawyer that she wanted him to argue for the case to be public, so the public could know all of the details. And clearly she was trying to hurt Betsy, but Vicki ain't do nothing but hurt herself. Because most of those elite men that I told you that Vicki had been messing around with, a lot of them were a part of Ronald Reagan's administration. Remember I told you that earlier. Well, Betsy Bloomingdale and Nancy Reagan were best friends. In fact, ALFRED Bloomingdale was a part of President Ronald Reagan's cabinet. So not only is Betsy Bloomingdale horrified by the details of her husband's affair splashed all over the newspapers and magazines, she's complaining and crying to Nancy Reagan. And Nancy is, I'm sure, telling her husband Ronald Reagan what's going on. I'm sure she's telling Ronald, look, listen, you know ALFRED's mistress, Vicki Morgan, you know she done messed with several men who serve up under you. And not only did Ronald Reagan, and I'm sure all of the men in his cabinet and administration want Vicki to shut up and stop talking to the press. What about all of the rest of the elites that she had recorded on tape for blackmail for ALFRED? I'm sure they wanted Vicki to shut up talking to the press too. So that's the second craziest choice that Vicki could have made. And then the third choice, my lord, it was just the straw that broke the camel's back. And that is because Vicki needed money from somewhere. So she decided to write a book. Oh, baby, come on. Not only did you have everybody I just named, all of the Reagan administration, as well as all of the elites, the blackmail tapes and all that good stuff. Now with writing the book, you had the other folks that Vicki had messed with on her own accord. What about the Saudi Arabian allegedly lesbian princess? What about the King of Morocco? What about other heads of states that she possibly messed around with? What about the maybe possible sex trafficking ring she was almost caught up with? Now, it's one thing dripping tidbits to the press, you know, telling them a couple of things. It's a whole nother thing having a whole book written, describing every detail, giving names, doing everything you're doing. Like, baby, what the heck is going on? But apparently Vicki was not thinking rationally at all, because she was standing tall. She was going to write her book and most likely reveal a lot of things about the elite. And the crazy part about it is Vicki knew from the very start that this idea was a terrible idea, because rumor has it when she put out word that she wanted to write a book, several high-paid popular authors reached out to her telling her that they wanted to write the book for her, only to come back around 2 to 3 days later telling Vicki that they couldn't do it, you know, making up all kind of excuses. Their schedules were busy, blah, 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 whatever it was. They could not write this book for her. And of course, anybody with sense could tell that the reason these people were canceling on her is because somebody must have threatened them. But I guess Vicki just didn't care, because when she could not get a big named author to write her book for her, she started searching for just some sort of regular small named author, and she found him. Gossip claims this author's name was Gordon, and you can tell Vicki still had a whole lot of mess going on, because allegedly, even though this author was a married man, Vicki started messing around with him, because Vicki was allegedly sleeping with this author, and also because he was helping her with the book. He was at her house pretty much constantly, and they worked together for several months. Well, allegedly during these several months, a lot of times while the author was over there, he noticed that Vicki's street lights, like the lights right in front of her house that lined the sidewalk, kept getting blown out. And sometimes they would even find the street lights shattered. Now, the author thought this was strange, but when he talked to Vicki about it, she just said, oh, you know, that's a natural, normal occurrence, probably just some teenagers in the neighborhood. Another thing this author noticed is that at one point, about 3 nights in a row, there was a black car parked down the street watching him when he would leave to go anywhere. Well, around the last 2 months of Gordon working with Vicki on this book, Vicki ended up getting a roommate. And this roommate just so happened to be Marvin Pancoast. Turns out he and Vicki had never all the way lost contact, and now he had persuaded her to let him move into the house with her. He picked up right where he left off in in the rehab center, always wanting to be around her, always doing anything she asked. The man pretty much acted like a servant. And some people tried to paint it like Marvin Pancoast was obsessed with Vicki, or that he even wanted to be Vicki. But Gordon, the author, as well as some people in the conspiracy theory community, feels like that wasn't what it was at all. They felt like Marvin was doing all of these things because he wanted to make sure he was able to stay in the house with Vicki, wanted to make sure he was able to keep his eyes on her. And so if he had to act like a servant and do whatever she said, then he would do it. And just to make this make sense for you guys, the reason the author Gordon, as well as people in the conspiracy theory community, felt this way is because they felt like Marvin Pancoast was sent by one of Vicki's enemies from the very beginning, from when he first showed up at the rehab when Vicki was there. Well, anyway, now that Marvin was living in the house with Vicki, the setup was pretty much the author Gordon and Vicki and Marvin. Well, on the night of July 6th, 1983, the author Gordon and Vicki ended up getting into an argument. And so Gordon told Vicki that he was leaving, and he claimed that when he said it, he saw Marvin have a smirk, like a quick smile, go across his face. Gordon doesn't really pay any mind to it though. He ends up leaving, but when he gets home, he calls Vicki around 11 o'clock that night. Gordon supposedly tells Vicki that he'll come back over the next day sometime later on in the evening. Well, Gordon would not come back over that next day because that night, after he'd gotten off the phone with Vicki, Marvin Pancoast allegedly grabbed a baseball bat and bashed Vicki's head in. After Marvin was done, he allegedly called the police and told them what he did, and the police recorded a confession, and supposedly it was an open and shut case. So open and shut that the police didn't even tape up the crime scene. After they removed Vicki's body, they left her house open for family and friends to come in and move whatever they needed. You know, maybe some people moved out some furniture that they wanted. Maybe other people moved out some blackmail videotapes that they wanted. Who knows? All I know is that I and several other people feel like this was nowhere near an open and shut case. Because first of all, Marvin Pancoast's fingerprints weren't even anywhere on that bat. Second of all, Marvin had no blood splatter, no blood anywhere on his clothes. Third of all, the way Marvin described the scene and the way he supposedly hit Vicki did not match the evidence on the body at all. He claimed that Vicki was asleep and he came up and just started hitting her in the head and she never even moved. You know, he just basically beat her. But Vicki's arms had bruises and abrasions all over them, like she was trying to fight and stop something. Her fingers had cuts on them, the whole nine. So while Marvin Pancoast probably had something to do with the murder, it was very questionable on if he was the one that swung the bat. But like I said, police didn't investigate any further. Marvin went to trial and he was convicted. And the story of Vicki Morgan, mistress of ALFRED Bloomingdale, was over. Until a month later when a mysterious lady walked into the law office of Robert Steinberg, opened her purse and handed over some tapes. Robert Steinberg claimed that these tapes were the actual blackmail tapes, and then not even 2 days later, he claimed that those tapes were stolen from his law office. In reality, this lawyer, Robert Steinberg, sold these tapes to Larry Flynt, the owner of Hustler magazine. Well, guess what? Not even a week later, Larry Flynt's homes and businesses were raided by the FBI and the CIA. And he himself ended up being convicted in the court of law on some charge and thrown into prison for a while. Larry, of course, never saw those tapes again. And it is said that those tapes were actually taken by the CIA and given to President Ronald Reagan himself. And once that happened, of course, it was so long bye-bye to any evidence that those so-called blackmail sex tapes even existed. And so this was the real end of the Vicki Morgan story. And so this is the end of the old Hollywood scandalous tale of Vicki Morgan. And again, I'm not sure if Kim Porter tried to write an Elite tell-all book, but if she did, I sure wish she would have reviewed the case of Vicki Morgan first. Anyway, guys, make sure you like this video. If you like the video, please subscribe. If you are new here, please subscribe. If you have been sitting on the bench, I am about to dive into this Tanqueray story because we got to get that video out fast. I think you guys will enjoy it. Love you. Bye.